We're gonna. All right,
Amazing.
let's get started.
Let's
Shane?
get started. Guys, I mean, he needs no introduction. He's written so many books on so many subjects. Earlier, I was just talking about how much I admire his ability to have such depth with such variety of material. He will talk you into a rabbit hole about everything from mentalism subjects to in-depth playing card stuff. I know at the session we sat down for at least a good hour, just getting like deep diving into Erdnase. And we almost did an event actually. We talked about it for a hot second about doing an Erdnase thing at the session. Um, yeah, I'm a huge fan. I've been following his work since I was not a kid so much, but since the magic shop in Toronto was my source of information, and I'm consistently delighted by the methods and the thinking of this man. He's changed my magic. I think he will change yours if he hasn't already. So yeah, guys, please welcome Luke Jermay.
Hello, everyone. Let me know that you can both see and hear me by just doing this in the chat. Let me see it. This is the version of applause that gives energy in the cold, static space of a virtual presentation. I mentioned to Shane and Derek earlier, I don't really do virtual shows and I don't really do virtual lectures. So today is an interesting experience for me because it marks something that I'm most interested in, which is doing things that you've not done before. And in this lecture, we're going to kind of make it a conversation if you've got any questions, and that conversation can go in any direction you want. It can be about mentalism, it can be about magic. But I thought, in the spirit of showing people things that they've not seen before, many of you will have not seen me do magic, will have not seen me do sleight of hand conjuring, because for the last 20 years, the majority, well, not the majority, the totality of my work has been on stage mentalism, shows inside of theaters, of audiences ranging from 300 to 10,000, depending on which year and which venue you might have seen something in. At the beginning, 300, at the end, 10,000. But I decided at the end of my last theatre tour that I was going to take 2 years off. And then I took 2 years off. And just as those 2 years were coming to an end, COVID arrived, which meant 2 years became 4 years, where I wasn't performing inside of theatres. And it was the first time in my life, in my magical career, that I had a really long period of time where I just stopped, where I wasn't going from one show to the next, from one thing to the next, where because of the way that the world had conspired, none of us could, right? We had to stand still for a while. And after moving for so many years and moving so far and so fast for so many years, standing still was a kind of brand new experience for me. And it allowed me to really take a moment to think about what I wanted to do next. And I realized in that bubble of standing still that what I wanted to do next was not what I had done before. And at first, I didn't really know what that meant. I just knew that it meant doing something different. And I didn't really push it or force it. I wasn't searching for what the next show would be. I just kind of knew that it wasn't going to happen inside of a theatre. And I kind of knew that it wasn't going to be mentalism. And we can talk about why later down the line and all of that stuff, if that's interesting to you. Flash forward to the present day, the show that I just premiered last year for a few months, only for 3 months, but it will return this year, was a close-up magic show. And when I say close-up magic, I mean close-up magic, cups and balls. There's even a card sword in that show. So it couldn't be more different from the work that I've done in the past. Those shows are for just 50 people at a time, and they are kind of unashamedly celebrating the silliness and the lightheartedness of magic, of conjuring. So I'm going to show you some conjuring tricks alongside conversations about mentalism and anything else that you might want. So we begin with a pack of playing cards, exactly like those that you might use to play games or to do tricks. But I will not waste your time with games or tricks. Instead, together, we will witness magic. And this magic begins with a choice that will be made by Orlando. Orlando, if you can unmute, that would be great. Orlando, as I deal the cards to the table, whenever you would like, say the word stop. Right here. I think maybe there was some kind of weird Zoom delay there that I'm not accustomed to, but are you happy with that one?
Happy with that one.
Perfect. Not one card less, not one card more. The one card that Orlando has chosen from an entire pack of cards is the Queen of Spades. Now, Orlando, this is good news. In cartomancy, the practice of fortune telling with playing cards, a black queen predicts an almost immediate encounter with a handsome stranger. Hello, Orlando. It's nice to meet you. Now, since you picked a queen, we're going to go ahead and use all 4 of them. And if you were here, I would ask you to help me in taking them out of the pack. But since you're not, I'll have to do the heavy lifting all by myself. That's 2, that's 3, and that's 4. 4 queens. Now, right now, these 4 queens are completely ordinary pieces of paper. There's nothing special about them at all. However, if you know the right kind of magic, and I do, well, then it's possible to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. That's it. It's done. Now, my invisible people that aren't here, have you ever felt a magical object before? No? Well, here, go ahead and enjoy. Have you ever felt a magical object before? No? Go ahead and enjoy. As you hold them, you might notice a slight tingling sensation in the very tips of your fingers. If it persists for more than 1 week, consult a local wizard. Now, as well as our 4 enchanted queens, we'll go ahead and use some other cards. The only thing that really matters about these is, since Orlando has picked one that is a picture card, we'll make sure as we go along that we only use cards that are numbers. In that way, we'll be able to keep everything easy to follow. Did you notice that tingling sensation? Yes. Okay, good. Be careful. It's addictive. Did you notice that tingling sensation? Yes, they say you never forget the first time. Now, as well as our 4 enchanted queens, we'll use nothing else, just 4 queens and 2 hands. We will take a moment to check that there are no other picture cards. No other picture cards. And last but not least, no other picture cards. I'm going to go ahead and place 3 cards on top of each one of our queens. The curtain rises and the ballet begins. On top of each one of our queens, 1 card. And Orlando, I'll ask for your help one more time since you're still on unmute. Please name a number between 1 and 4, whichever number you would prefer. Number 2. Number 2 from your perspective, not mine. So 1, 2, not 1, 2, correct? Good. Orlando, what I'd like you to do is keep your eyes on that packet. 1, 2, not 1, 2 from mine. Orlando, you keep your eyes on your cards. Everybody else, you keep your eyes on the Queen of Clubs, because to begin with, that queen is face up where everybody can see her, and yet with the right kind of magic, that queen takes flight, because where there was a queen just a moment ago, now there is not a queen. You can see nothing hidden in the fingertips. That's not a queen. That's not a queen. That's not a queen. And that is not a queen. Isn't magic wonderful? We'll continue as we mean to go along with just the next queen, the Queen of Hearts, your next opportunity to see their magic. See it with your eyes wide open. Because remember, one day, your eyes will close forever. The final queen, the next queen, the Queen of Hearts, begins like those that came before her, face up amongst the other cards. You can see where that queen is, and yet with the right, you know, this invisible person here, your skepticism is palpable. It's like the aura of the Buddha, 100 miles wide. So here, I'll go ahead and let you see where that queen is. The Queen of Hearts right there. Go ahead and take one finger and actually touch the queen on the front and on the back. Very good. I won't even touch the queen. I'll use the wand to push the queen all the way in, and yet with the right kind of magic, what was a queen just a moment ago is no longer a queen. You can see that's not a queen, that's not a queen, that's not a queen, and that is not a queen. Just 4 cards, which at this point are examined by the spectator. Here, go ahead and check that there truly are only 4 cards, not 2 cards stuck together, no generative AI, no technology, just 4 pieces of paper, no queens. Isn't magic wonderful? Our final queen, the Queen of Spades, your last opportunity to see this magic. See it with your eyes wide open, because I don't need to remind you again that one day your eyes will close forever. The final queen, the Queen of Spades, is going to be mixed amongst the other cards, just like those. You know, we won't even use any of those, just the queen. And yet with the right magic, that queen takes flight. Isn't magic wonderful? And I want you to see that this is not an illusion. This is not a trick of the eye. This is magic, where just a moment ago there were queens, now there are none. No queens, no queens, no queens, no queens. Because Orlando's been watching that packet from the beginning, and this is the mystery of the enchanted queens. So, this is obviously a version of an ace assembly, and we're going to talk specifically about the method for that trick in a while. It's a very complicated effect. It has lots of sort of moving parts and lots of additions to it that, that result in a very, very fooling handling of that trick. Now, how fooling it is in this medium, I'm not entirely sure, because it's designed to be done with people and to have the kind of dynamic interaction that you get with human beings, as opposed to the kind of unforgiving eye of a camera lens. But it has fooled some of the best magicians in the world, especially the second phase, where you immediately hand those 4 cards out for examination. And that's something I'm really proud of. So we're going to talk about the method for that. But first, we're eager to make part of what we're doing today a conversation. So it's not just me doing a monologue about how a trick works. Instead, to invite some questions from everybody that's here that I'll be more than happy to answer. Now, I would assume there are 2 ways that you can do this. You can either raise your virtual hand and then Derek will bring you in, or you can raise your virtual hand and stick something inside of the chat if you don't want to ask the question personally. But if you have a question, bring it to the surface now, and then we can start entering into those questions once we finish the explanation of this trick. So basically load things up with questions now, so that when we get to it, we've got some stuff to talk about. So this is a handling of the McDonald's aces, which I'm sure everybody in this group is well aware of. But it's a handling that's designed to, I think, really well obscure the use of double-faced cards. I think that in general, magicians have completely lost touch as a whole, as a community. One of the things that we're kind of guilty of is that we've completely lost touch with what good magic is. And I think that you have to continually remind yourself what good magic is, because you and I, when I use the word you, I'm talking collectively, including myself in that. We are part of a community that has obscured the notion of community as a marketplace. It's in the best interest of all magic dealers to make us think and feel that we are part of a community, when in truth, we are a part of a marketplace. The marketplace is pandering often to the kind of magic that is only interesting to the niche of the marketplace. If we were to go through the majority of the magic that's on offer for sale by most magic dealers, most of that magic isn't especially good magic. It might be interesting to us, right? And I'm not saying that we should devalue it or that it shouldn't exist, because I buy tons of magic and tons of mentalism, and I buy it wide-eyed and knowing that I'm never going to perform it. right? I am never going to, in a show, take out a piece of chewing gum, put it in my mouth, chew it, and spit it out as the shape of a superhero. I'm never going to do that trick. But I bought that trick because I was interested to see what the ingenious method might be. So I'm not devaluing the existence of that magic. I think there is value to it. And very often in buying things like that, you find yourself connecting some dots between one thing and another that maybe you wouldn't have done without it. So I'm not saying that it doesn't have a place. It does. But in my understanding of the way that I approach making shows, that kind of magic's place is as a kind of hobby that's separate from my job of being a magician. My hobby is being part of this magic marketplace. My job is making magic shows and mind reading shows. I mention all of this because the McDonald's Aces is a great example of how familiarity has bred contempt. You look at all of the versions that are available of various Ace assemblies that are out there that get sold year on year, that have these quirky, strange things going on. In my opinion, none of them are as good as the McDonald's Aces. And the key reason that the McDonald's Aces is the best Ace assembly is because it's the Ace assembly that allows the queens or whatever cards you use to be on display for the longest period of time. So Arturo Ascanio's notion of the initial and the final result, the resulting condition, Ascanio talks about very clearly how the magical effect is going to be stronger the shorter the space of time is between the initial condition and then the changed magical condition. So any assembly that you perform where it requires you to put the 4 cards face down from the beginning is not as strong as an assembly which keeps those cards face up until the final reveal, because the time of between the initial and the final condition is being stretched. That's the first reason. The second reason, of course, that the McDonald's Aces is the greatest version of an Ace assembly in the world is that the visuals that double-faced cards allow you are unbeatable with sleight of hand, right? Even if you are an expert at the kind of the Cliff Green style, you know, doubles from the top to the table, even if you've practiced that your entire life, it doesn't compete with a double-faced card. It just can't. So with all of that in mind, there are a couple of problems with the original McDonald's Aces. And the first problem is this, the obvious problem, that if I take a queen and then I place it on the face of the packet, and then I remove a queen, and oh my God, the face card transformed for absolutely no reason. If I then turn that double over, oh my God, the face card transformed for absolutely no reason. So this is the standard handling that we see, just turning over, getting a break, putting the double facer on the top and doing a double lift, and then showing it's vanished in some way. Now, Charlie Miller famously said that no magic trick is complete without a discrepancy. But what he really meant there was simply that magic isn't real. That's what he was actually saying when he made that statement, right? If you go back to the original Magicana article where he first said that statement, he's discussing the fact that the tyranny of magic, the challenge of magic is that it requires a discrepancy because we don't have real magical power. He wasn't saying, oh, those kinds of things are okay. So I hear this used quite frequently. This Charlie Miller said that no magic trick is complete without a discrepancy. I use it as a kind of a way, I've heard it used as a way that people kind of talk away really bad discrepancies in magic tricks. And that's worth considering, that in a magic trick, there is such a thing as a good discrepancy and a bad discrepancy. So for me, this is a bad discrepancy because the theatrical drive at this moment in the effect should be fully focused on the cards. In order for us to obscure this glaring discrepancy, we would have to apply very robust misdirection. And yet the theatrical life, right? The theatrical intention that exists separate from the magician within the trick they're doing as a separate entity, it's there living and breathing, and your job is to find it. it demands full focus on the cards. So if you have a discrepancy that's this clear, you obviously can't have full focus in that moment. So we need to overcome that. So let's now talk about how this handling aims to do exactly that. So you need 3 double-faced cards. In my case, I use queens. And the reason for that is, and I do this in a lot of the magic that I do, I have a very vivid memory of seeing Ricky Jay perform his handling of the McDonald's Aces when he was in London at the Old Vic performing 52 Assistants. I was very young, but I have a very vivid memory of it. It was the first time that I saw a magician who performed in a style that I looked at and thought, this is not stupid. This is something that's valuable, or, you know, and I loved magic even at that point. I was learning magic. But all of the performers that I'd seen around me were kind of doing bad impressions of David Williamson at that point, right? And that is probably the most horrific thing you can imagine. A bunch of English people doing a bad impression of David Williamson, right? It couldn't be a worse thing. So seeing Ricky perform in this way kind of changed the way that I saw magic. When I have these foundational memories, I very often try to use little emotional triggers within the effects that bring that feeling back to me in the moment that I'm performing the effect. So I use queens because Ricky used queens, right? If you remember Ricky's version of the trick, he produces the 4 queens. But there's always this moment when I perform the trick where I have these 4 queens in front of me, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I remember that foundational experience of seeing Ricky do the trick, and it kind of fills me with a certain energy, right? It gives me a certain something that maybe I wouldn't get if I was using 4 aces. But that's the reason that I use the 4 queens, is because it brings me back to that experience of seeing Ricky. But you can use any cards you want. So we have 3 double faces. Now, these double faces are half roughed. So there's half roughing, which is the creation of Dr. Rathbone Laszlo III. Sounds like a cool guy, who invented what he called the super roughed card, which was in the Jinx magazine. I know very little about him, apart from the fact that he invented the idea of the half roughed card. And that he has, I think, one of the coolest names in magic. And I imagine with a name like that, he probably had amazing parties. He was from Prague in the 1940s. It's probably quite a good guy to know, right? Like little pencil mustache for sure. Like he was a guy. So 3 double-faced cards, they're all half roughed. Now, this is where things get a little complicated because you'll have to adapt this to whatever double-faced cards you're using. So in my double-faced cards, you can see that my queens are a red 9, a red 10, and a black 9. So the next 3 cards that I place here need to be as follows: the mate of the red 9, the mate of the black 9, and then any card. So really what I'm doing here is mating the card in position 1 with the card in position 4. I'm mating the card in position 3 with the card in position 5. Now, any 3 cards. Now, any 2 cards. And then at the end, we have another roughed card. So a pair. And this is a duplicate of the face of my double facer here. I don't know why the camera is making the cards blur. I apologize for that if you're seeing that on your side. That is on the face there like that. So that's the full setup. I force a queen on the spectator. You don't have to, right? You could just take out the queens and begin the trick. But I think it's stronger if the audience believe they chose the 4 of a kind that's in use. So that's my preference. Now, something that I couldn't do here because I don't have humans with me, but is part of really where the trick begins, is that I should mention that the half roughed cards, by the way, is simply so at the beginning I spread the deck like this and no double faces are on display. If you don't mind that, you don't need to rough them. right? Then actually it's only used for that in my handling. And it makes one thing at the end a little easier. But apart from that, you don't necessarily need it. But what I was going to mention was, so I bring the deck out and I have the queens chosen. And then after the queen has been chosen, I say, since you've picked a queen, we'll go ahead and use all 4 of them. Maybe you can help me find them. And I go through, and this couldn't happen here because I don't have humans with me, but you just play it out in your head. I go through the cards and I intentionally miss the first queen. I intentionally push past it. I see it, but I intentionally push past it. And now I take out the other queens and I act like I can't find the last queen. I look like this, and one of these spectators will invariably point to the queen because I've pushed past it and I've exposed its face bigger than the other cards. They will invariably do that. And at that moment, I say, perfect, you should do the show. And now I take the last queen out. The reason for this is, at this moment, what I really want to express to the audience is that there are only 4 queens. But if I was to say, please observe, there are only 4 queens, that's like hearing a politician say, please trust me. Immediately, you just don't believe it. However, when I say, where's the last, I can't find the last one, and they say, it's there, they now lie to themselves because they've scanned the deck in searching for that final queen. So they tell a lie to themselves, which means I don't have to tell the lie to them. So now that final queen is taken out. Now I do the magical gesture with the wand. And part of the reason for this is, at this point, what I want to say to the audience is, please notice that these cards have backs. But if I was to say that, it would be the most insane thing in the world. Of course they have backs, they're playing cards. So instead I say, right now, these 4 queens are completely ordinary pieces of paper. And I look at them myself, which means that I know you're seeing the backs. And then I bring them back down. But if you know the right kind of magic, it's possible to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. And now I do this with the wand. So this allows me to now have these cards examined. But when it comes to the examining of objects, I think all close-up magic is better if people examine objects, by the way. All close-up magic. Every single close-up magic trick is better if the spectators are able to examine an object. Not that you should be performing in such a way that you are fearful of having objects taken from you, right? Which is the kind of baby magician fear is, you know, when you do something and they say, oh, but is it examinable? I don't mean in that way, because you should have management and control of your audience, that they're not grabbing things out of your hands. But right now, I want to put these cards in the hands of someone so that they actually know they are regular cards. We're at a point in history where there are entire generations of young people who have actually never held a playing card. The good old days of everybody having a pack of cards in their drawer in their kitchen and then getting them out and playing a game once in a while have gone, because most young people's relationships to playing cards now is not that they don't play games with cards, it's just that they don't need 52 pieces of paper anymore because their deck of playing cards is on their smartphone. It's on their device. So they might still play all sorts of card games, but their deck of cards lives in their pocket. It doesn't live as individual pieces of paper. So for those kinds of spectators, these could be anything. These could be weird, tricky cards. They could be anything. But when we think about examining an object, think about the theatrical subtext of saying to someone, please examine these cards. The problem with that theatrical subtext is that essentially what you are saying is, here, I want you to know how clever I am. That's actually the subtext beneath the statement. So we need to find a different way of saying that. So I say, we can transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. Have you ever felt a magical object before? No? Well, here, enjoy. Have you ever felt a magical object before? No? Well, here, enjoy. Because now it's in the spirit of sharing instead of in the spirit of prove it. but it functions in exactly the same way. The spectator is now handling them, they're feeling them, right? So I've managed to have all of this stuff examined without having that kind of horror overtone. Now the cards are in the hands of the spectators. I spread to the ruffed pair. So here's the ruffed pair. I know that that's the end of the spread. I now say we'll only use number cards because you've picked a picture card, and I get a break under the third card. Now, you could, of course, do a pinky count if you want to do that. I don't like that technique. I think it's a bad technique. I personally think any method that requires excessive force or tension is going to be the opposite of nonchalance. It's going to give you the opposite of the feeling of magic, right? All techniques should feel, like Di Vernon said, that the cards are a bird that might fly away, right? So if you imagine that this is a bird that might fly away, and then you start doing pinky counting, you just crushed the bird's bones, right? Like you just killed the bird, whereas it should be able to fly away. And I also strongly believe that any technique, even if it's something as foundational or as simple as getting a break, should happen on a moment under the cover of misdirection. So here I say, since you picked a picture card, we'll make sure that we only use ones that have numbers. And all of my attention shifts forward, which allows me to then just push one card off slightly and back again with my thumb to get the break. So now I can come back here and move this and square this back into the packet with my break under 3, but with no tension and with the action taking place under the cover of misdirection. Now, here we're going to get even more detailed. The pinky break is actually not a great method for true close-up magic, because the pinky break is visible to about a half of the audience that are sat with you. Juan Tamarice's fantastic solution to this is to just turn your hand down. It's a very good solution to the problem. No one can see through the tabletop. But for me, that looks a little bit suspicious. I don't like that handling of the cards to turn the hand down. So depending on how close people are to me, I'll either stick with the pinky break if it's a more parlor-like scenario where I can turn the wrist in this fashion and kill all of the bad angles. But if it's true close-up, meaning people are close enough that they could touch my nose, that's my definition of true close-up magic, is that if you have a human being that's close enough that they could reach out and touch your nose, then it's true close-up magic. In those scenarios, I shift the break from the pinky over into something called the Altman trap, which is not really used. It's a break that's formed through the fleshy part of the thumb here. So that this now means that the packet is closed on the front edge and on the side. The only place the break is visible is at the very back where I am. So now the angles change from the pinky break, which gives you that bad angle. Suddenly the only bad angle is here. So it depends on the environment you're in, whether you need to worry about that or not. Now, we are going to take 2 queens back. We're going to take the queens back and we're going to lift everything above the break off in the style of the Merlin's ace routine to switch in our double faces. But there's a lot more detail to it than that. The reason that we split into 2 is so that we have a reason to bring the cards back on top of the packet. Rather than having 4 queens here, if I have 4 queens with 1 spectator and I take all 4 back, why am I putting them on the face of the packet? So that's why I've done 2 and 2. The next part of this is that when these queens come back, I make sure that they're jogged. They're not square. So this is a tip that will improve almost all card magic. For the last maybe 120 years, if you look at the history, the evolution of technical card magic approaches, the majority of technique is based on the magician taking a pack of cards that's already perfectly well squared and then being really sure, right? So here's a very easy way of improving all card magic. When you put the deck down, make sure it's not square. So now when you need to pick the deck up, let's say you need to get a break, when you pick the deck up, you now have a reason to square the packet to secure your break. So that alone, if you build that into your natural behavior of the way that you handle cards, will transform many of the kind of techniques that are all about squaring the edges of cards. So with that in mind, remember we've got our break under 3. We're going to take 2 queens back here. And now I'm going to take those 2 and turn them face down, but leave them stepped as I make a comment to this spectator. I now take these 2 back, turn them face down, but leave them stepped. The reason that they're stepped is now I have a reason to come over, which is to square them. Okay? So now I have a reason to come to this position to get the cards at the break. Now we're going to move to another foundational piece of magic that's been lost, piece of sleight of hand technique. Generally speaking, an upward action is a bad action, because upward actions, this is why when you see somebody do this with a deck of cards, it's so horrendously painful, right? It's so painful to witness that. You cannot hide this upward action. The solution is, rather than doing an upward action, is to do this. It's a downward action. So I'm going to exaggerate it so it makes sense, but the top card remains on the same plane. The rest of the cards drop because you can't follow those cards on the front edge. So if I want to get a break under that top card, instead of coming here and lifting up on it, which draws the eye because you have a line here that tells you the plane of the card is changing, that card stays in the same position. The rest of the deck falls down. Now, this is applicable well beyond getting a break under a top card, because remember, we are now in this position. We take the 2 queens back. We take those ones back. Then we take these ones back. Now we come here, we square up, and instead of lifting the hand up, we drop the other hand down. So the queens stay in the same place. Everything above the break remains with the queens. But I need a reason for my hand to move, this hand that's going to drop down. And that's why I left the wand there. Because now I can come here and take the wand out of the way. So suddenly all of the action is covered. This packet now consists of the 4 regular queens followed by the 3 double faces squared as 1. And it's been lifted off. I now put everything underneath and turn the packet over. I now deal the first queen, the second queen, and now here, because of my routine, I just move the spade and the diamond to this position so they end up red, black, red, black. I need to put that queen down here without exposing those 3 queens. So I do a necktie. As I deal the cards to the table here, the motivation, the misdirection for this action is that I just moved the wand back here, but now I move the wand out of the way to put the cards in that spot. So that's all of your misdirection for this switch. And what it now means is that you've got 3 double faces, one regular card switched in. Now we're going to show 3, turn them over, put them under the back. 3, and split and show the other 3. Come back, square over 3, show the other 3 again, turn everything over, put it underneath. So we've now hidden the 3 queens in amongst the packet. Now I'm going to do a Charlie Miller move, the face-up bottom deal, which I think is extremely well suited to an ace assembly, to put the 3 queens here. To make the first one easy, because the first deal is actually top, top, bottom, double. So it's kind of horrible, but eat the frog, right? Do the hard thing early. So top, top, bottom, double. But to make that easier, I say the curtain rises and the ballet begins. And this wide action here allows me to side jog the bottom queen. So my first bottom deal isn't even a bottom deal, it's flying out because of how far jogged it is, which then allows me to hit that double over here because I can be focused on that double. Remember, this is also ruffed. This is your ruffed pair. So that double isn't as hard as it sounds because it wants to stay together. Now I do a top, a bottom, a top, a top, a top, a bottom, and a top. So I think it's a very good technique for an ace assembly because you really feel like you're seeing the faces of the cards as they go down. Now we have somebody pick a packet. If they say 3, I say 1, 2, 3. If they say 2, I say from your perspective, not mine. Of course, they say yes, because nobody sees the world through somebody else's perspective, right? So now I push that packet forwards. Now we get to the first vanish, very traditional. That goes in there. I reverse count the packet so you see it. I now do the magical gesture. I now do an Elmsley count so that it's face down. Now I want to grip the packet at the extreme tips of the fingers, which is going to make this next move easy. But to do this is kind of weird because it's a weird grip. So I say, and look, nothing hidden between the fingers. So it allows me to put the cards in this weird grip. I've also found that in any magic trick, if you, at some point you show there is nothing hidden in your hands, it makes the trick stronger. I don't know why. Like you could be sawing a woman in half, and if you pause halfway through and just say, and look, there is nothing hidden in my hands, the audience react more strongly as if you were palming her stomach. I don't know why, but they do. So, you know, I come here. This now means that I can do Ed Marlowe's automatic bottom deal. So I'm just going to grip the face packet card and turn 3 away. That's it. So there's our double facer. Now, when I do this trick myself in my show, I have people standing all around me. I have the back row of the room come up onto the stage to become the front row and stand behind me. So I have 2 people here and about 25 people behind me. So all of it has to be covered from every angle because I've got people left, right, front, and back. So, but this is a particularly good move for that because you just do this. And now you've got your first vanish. Done. Now, the second vanish. I take the queen and push it into the table. And now I seemingly scoop that queen up. But of course, I'm just levering the top card with my pinky in order to slide it beneath the queen as I then turn the hand over. It's a fantastic display for a double-faced card because it's very nonchalant, it's very casual. I now do a double lift and now put the queen in the center. So now I can show the queen on both sides. I square it up and I act as though a spectator to my right is skeptical and wants to see the queen again. I turn to that side and I do an Elmsley count to display the queen. Then I pull back the top 2 cards, leaving the queen and 1 card squared. And I can say to the spectator, go ahead and touch the queen on the back. And they do. Touch the queen on the front. I just apply pressure here to make sure that they don't split the double. They never do. Touch it on the back, touch it on the front. I square it up. And now I do another Elmsley count. So all I have to do is an Elmsley count to show the red 9. At which point I turn the cards over and say, that's not a queen, that's not a queen, that's not a queen, that's not a queen. And now I can hand these 4 out. The reason for this is the setup that we did earlier. Because what you did earlier will leave on this pile of cards over here that nobody cares about. This face card is a black 9. At the end, your double facer here is also a black 9. So you end with 1 card face down that the audience believes to be a queen. It isn't, right? Sorry, we've done the display. So now they've seen that it's not a queen. I now turn this packet over and say, that's not a queen. And I immediately take that card and throw it all the way to the end of that packet. And now my finger just touches the face packet and draws it out away over here. So I'm switching a double facer for a regular card. And at speed, it looks like this. So the count is finished. I say, and you can see that's not a queen, that's not a queen. So you've switched your card out now. And it's happening under your arm. So there's really no way anyone's going to see it. But just to give us a little bit more of psychological misdirection, at this point, I take the face down card and I suspiciously snap it to the table as though I am doing something suspicious. And now I say, and that's not a queen. I use that card to scoop these up. So now I'm far away from where the switch happened when I say, and that's not a queen. So all of their suspicion has been drawn here in a kind of John Ramsey-esque style garden path feint, which now allows me to immediately have these 4 cards examined. So this is devastating to magicians because, you know, I often joke that when I do this trick for lay people, it's the vanishing queens. When I do it for magicians, it's the vanishing double backers, the vanishing double faces, right? But also don't underestimate just how magical this is for a lay person. It's the kind of thing that magicians often say things like, oh, but you don't need to bother with all that for the real people. I think it's worth it because it increases the impact hugely, right? So now I can immediately hand these to the person and there's no queen. Now we come to the final queen. Now remember over here we have a card, and a pair that's ruffed. I want to cut the packet because I want to unpair the ruffing. But I haven't done any kind of cutting at any point. So if I suddenly pick that packet up and cut it, it would be very odd. So instead, I reach for the packet, I riffle the bottom card from the packet, pick up the cards, and then notice that I left one behind and put it back on the top. So I've cut the packet through some inconsequential action. I now do the same thing where I scoop the queen up, but lever it to the second position. I now do a double followed by spreading 3. So now you're seeing 4 backs, and I'm having to like move my body in a strange way because of the camera here. But you're seeing 4 backs. I now turn this double over in the hand using the Stuart Gordon turnover move. And now I use it to turn those 3 cards over. Now on the face here, we have a 9 of hearts that has ruffing on it. The back of this card is the 9 of hearts. So you get a perfect vanish. As soon as that double goes here and it comes off the packet, nothing changes on the face. And because it's roughed, you can now say, so once you've done the double, I say, you know what, this time we won't use this one, we won't use this one, and we won't use this one. So it's very easy to handle because of the roughing. Now, here's the killer thing that I've not actually taught in any other magic lecture about this trick that I do for real people. I can't do it now because I don't have a real person here. But I actually don't drop this card on the table. I drop this card on their hand, their outstretched palm, and I have them place one finger on top. And at this moment, I say to the spectator, here is your last opportunity to see the queen. And I lift back the card and show them the queen. The truth is, I just do this so that they can't see any of the card. I come here, I pull it back. The spectator is literally looking at the backs of my fingers, but to the audience, it appears that I'm showing the spectator the queen. So you have to experiment a little bit with this. And I just use pure force of personality to get them to agree that they just saw the queen. So now you have a miracle moment because I say, and here's your last opportunity to see the queen. Even though you just saw the queen in your own hand, the queen takes flight. Take a look. And now it has changed. So this is an incredibly strong technique because as far as the audience are concerned, you took a queen, you turned it down, you dropped it on someone's hand, you eliminated the other cards, you showed it was a queen to a spectator, they confirmed, and now it's not, right? It's at the very height of what could be in this trick. Now we come to the very end. I can see where one of my double faces is. I take it out and throw it to the face. I now put everything on top of the 6 and square everything up. This means that the packet is now double face card, regular card, double face card, regular card, all of the cards, double face card, regular card. So if you're glutton for punishment, at this point I say, I want you to see that this is not an illusion, this is magic. Where just a moment ago there were queens, and I deal a double, followed by another double, followed by a single, a single, a single, a single, a single, a single, and then the last double. So you're seeing the backs. So if we do that at speed, I want you to see that this is not an illusion, this is magic. Where just a moment ago, excuse me, where just a moment ago there were queens, now there are none. No queen, no queen, no queen, no queen, no queen. And now these cards get placed aside. And this was actually the moment that took the longest for me to find, the revelation of the four queens. Because what I found in this trick, much like the cups and balls, and Michael Skinner famously spoke about this issue with the cups and balls, and that led to him finding his final display where the spectators lift the cups up. Much like the cups and balls, when you do this trick for real people, if you turn this card over and they see a queen, it's such a strong trick for a real audience that they kind of go, no. And then by the time they've looked back, all of the cards are face up and you've lost something in that moment. So I needed a way to get everything on view at once. And this is what I found. And I have to say, I think it's really pretty, right? To say, and this is the mystery. And the great thing about doing this with people behind you is that they now see the queens. So they react before everybody else. And then I look here and I just look left and right and then show the rest of the audience. And by lifting the wand up in the air, it gives me a really solid way of increasing applause, which is dropping it. Boom. Like a mic drop, right? Like you just drop the wand and now you're in an applause cue position. And often at this moment, I stand up and I then usher those people off, but that boosts the applause again. So there is the world's most complicated explanation of the world's most complicated version of the McDonald's Aces. But it's a trick that I do for the public in every one of these magic shows that I've been doing. And in my experience, it's very, very strong. And the thing that I'm most proud of outside of obviously the composition, I think it's a personal composition, but the real contribution I've made is this switch under the arm. That's the thing that I think is my original contribution. All of the rest of it is more or less like personalizing a recipe, putting it together to your own tastes. But that switch under the arm is something that I think is new. Never seen it anywhere. I've spoke to lots of people about it. So that's kind of my contribution to it is that switch under the arm. I'm going to open up the chat and see if there are any questions. Shane says, fantastic, thank you. No question, but I love the line, one day you will close your eyes forever. Chills. Yeah, so I think that one of the jobs of the artist is to remind us that we will die. That's one of the jobs of an artist. So quite frequently in the work that I do, I put things like that in it. And one of the reasons is that I think that it's part of the work of the artist to remind us that we're here for a limited period of time. And if we really think about that, maybe we'd live differently and we'd live a life that was more exciting. But also it allows for a sort of shift of tone and texture within the shows that I do. Something that's very important to realize about the work that I do is that I don't do private parties. I don't do walk around magic. I don't do corporate magic. I don't do trade show magic. I don't do hospitality magic. You can't book me to go to your house and do a magic show for your party. And the reason for that is not arrogance, right? It sounds like, oh, he's arrogant saying I don't do any of those jobs. The reason I don't do that is because I'm not very good at doing any of that. My style would be utterly self-indulgent in any of those environments. If somebody walked up to you at a corporate event and was like, a pack of playing cards, remember, one day your eyes will close forever, right? Like that would just be awful, right? So utterly self-indulgent in those environments. I only do shows where people buy tickets and then they come and see the show inside of a theatrical space. So they're walking in with that understanding of the relationship between me and them. But with that relationship, it means that I can say things like, see this with your eyes wide open, because remember, one day your eyes will close forever. Because inside of a proscenium arch, you have the sanctity of theatre, where audiences understand the relationship of the artist inside of the theatrical space. Whereas if you did that maybe in a corporate booking, maybe the corporate booker at the end is going to be like, don't do that. Don't tell people they're going to die, right? And rightly so, because in that environment, that isn't your job. So just be aware that the only perspective I can talk from about magic or mentalism is from within a proscenium arch, within a theatrical space. And the responsibilities and the duties of a performer in that space are different from the responsibilities and the duties of a performer in some other space. So great. Sharing versus proving, what a great blending of method and effect. Thank you. Beautiful, brilliant, my new favorite. Thank you. Shane, fantastic. George, to everyone. I'm curious about your thoughts on sequencing close-up effects into an intimate set and how those considerations might change. Approaching a 20-minute set versus an hour, for example. Unfortunately, I have to return to work now, so I'll have to catch the response later on. No worries. So in very quick terms, much like the famous Mark Twain quote, you know, I apologize to send a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one. You know, that's also true of magic, that I think it's much harder to do really good magic in short form, because it's much harder in short form to create a journey with the audience. So the shows that I think I've achieved the best responses and best connection from in an intimate setting and in bigger settings tend to be no shorter than 50 minutes, right? 50 minutes, 55 minutes feels like about the right length for a close-up show to get somewhere. The show that I actually perform is 3 hours long and it has 2 intervals, but it's to do with specific formats within the show that I'm currently doing. But the main show, the close-up show at the table where we all sit together, aims to be 55 minutes, but most nights I end up making it 60 because I'm not good enough to do it in 55, right? If I was better at my job, it would be 50 minutes, it wouldn't be 55. So my feeling on making a 20-minute set is it's extraordinarily difficult to get any kind of depth in 20 minutes. But what I think you can get is riotous fun. So I think you have to be clear of what's possible within the time frame that you have. An example of this is the kind of work that I am interested in, or the kind of work that I do, really can only happen in long form, 55 minutes, an hour. Whereas kind of riotous fun can happen in 20 minutes, and you only need to look as far as Don Allen to see how good that can be, right? If you watched Don Allen do 20 minutes, it was the best 20 minutes of magic in the world, right? If you watched Al Goshman do 20 minutes, it was the best 20 minutes of magic in the world. Goshman has aged much worse, you know, since his performance than Don Allen. When you watch Goshman now, it feels really like it's aged badly because of sort of social change and so on. But Don Allen has held up quite well. But regardless of, you know, the world changing around these, they are literally statues, they are frozen in film, right? The world changing around them. Both of those had 20-minute acts, and both of them was just a roller coaster of magic. There was no big story. There was no real attempt to get to intimate depth. It was just see these amazing things. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that if your challenge is to work in 20 minutes, you know, pick the right battle and use the right weapon. Don't arrive to a 20-minute set expecting that you're going to get deep emotional storytelling potential, because you're not. You can't in 20 minutes, at least in my opinion. So then let's go to Bryce's question. Great structure to this routine. Thanks. Okay, perfect. Well, hopefully you all enjoyed that. And I've got no idea how long it was. Oh, about an hour. So an hour-long explanation for an ACE assembly. Jesus. So let's do some questions, and then we'll start wrapping up whenever everybody needs to. So if there are any questions that anybody wants to ask.
Yeah, Luke, on the other side of things, recently we saw sort of a print of a book, The Hummingbird, which is the rising card.
Mm-hmm.
About your love of the trick. It's one of my favorite effects in Magic. So just the fact that you're diving into that excites me.
Yeah, I think the rising card is probably the greatest card trick you can do, right? And the rising card, the interesting thing about the rising card premise is that it's so clearly magic with cards as opposed to card magic, right? Something like an ace assembly, like this thing that I just showed you, that's more like card magic than magic with cards, right? Whereas the rising cards is just so magical, it's so archetypally magical, that to me, it kind of transcends even being in the category of card magic, right? It sort of sits outside of it just because it's so magical. And yeah, it's one of my sort of favorite effects. I closed my current show on it. I'm just looking at the questions. Boring questions. Is this assembly published yet? No, it's in. So there's a set of lecture notes that I made for the session convention a long time ago now, 3 years ago maybe, which is the only other place that I've explained this. And they were like video lecture notes. So essentially it's me sat right here doing what I just did to a camera. So that's it. But if you're interested, you can email me or something. But it's not publicly available because it's still part of my show. I'm only sharing it with sort of select groups at this point. But if you're interested, if you need it, let me know. I love the depth and dedication of reasoning you put into the routine. Yeah, thanks. I think that the more you look at the magic you do, the more you can find justification. And if you find justification and choreography of action, it will make everything more magical, right? Like the way that I view close-up magic is it's a little bit like the atmosphere of magic. And I tend to use the Ascanio terminology as kind of my first line of thought, because when I was very young, I was influenced a lot by Ascanio, thanks to my first magic teacher, who was a man called Ron McMillan, who introduced me to Ascanio, and I spent time with him when I was very young. So he was a foundational kind of experience. And I think his greatest gift to the magic community is not necessarily the routines that we have left behind from Ascanio, because honestly, I'm not really a fan of Ascanio's construction of magic. On a personal level, it's not to my taste. But what I am a huge fan of, and what Ascanio gave us as a community, is an incredible lexicon. He gave us incredible language that allows us to communicate deeply complex ideas with great ease. Right? So if we use the Ascanian language of an in-transit action, suddenly we're talking about something that's really complex and we can say it just a few words. So I tend to use Ascanio's language to describe things. So when I talk about the atmosphere of magic, I'm talking about the atmosphere of magic as defined by Ascanio, this kind of complete absence of the feeling of method. And the important word there is the feeling of method. Because so this atmosphere of magic, to achieve that, is very hard. It's a very, very difficult task. And I think that doing a show of close-up magic is a little bit like having a bubble, like a soap bubble on your hand. And for the whole show, you're trying to pass it from one hand to the other without that bubble bursting, right? That's kind of what you're doing. You're trying to keep this bubble of the magical atmosphere alive, and you're having to be that gentle to keep it from bursting. And anytime there's an action that is incongruent to what is logical in that sequence, the bubble's bursting, right? So if you suddenly put the deck down and then pick the deck back up and then put the deck back down again, you just burst the bubble, right? The bubble burst because why did you pick it up to put it down, to pick it up to put it down? You did that so you could palm a card, but that isn't good enough, right? You're trying to keep the bubble alive. So in terms of finding the reasoning of the routine, that's how I always view it, is that all of those moments of thinking about how things are constructed is in an effort to keep that bubble from bursting, right? Yeah, good. We can do another trick if you want, or if there are more questions, I'm happy to just talk about things.
What's your preference?
I don't mind, whatever everybody wants. I can show you a coin.
Or a trick that you wish you saw performed more often?
I'm sorry, say again?
Do you have a dream effect or a trick that you wish you'd seen magicians perform more often?
Yeah, so the thing that I think is sadly missing in magic shows these days is the production of food. And that sounds like a joke, but I mean it.
No,
right?
I know exactly what you mean.
If you look at, Conjuring Arts recently released this lovely new updated lovely typeset version of the Volkmann book on the history of magic. It's a really great book, and and I'd read it. I'd read the original articles when they were published in the Magic Wand magazine, because I had that when I was a teenager from like back when I was a teenager, nobody cared about old magic magazines. Now they're selling them quicker than the eye for £50 million. But when I was a kid, like a collected box of dusty old magazines were like £2 in the magic shop. So I would buy those because that's what I could access. And I had the magic wand where the Volkmann series was originally published. And I had read them then. But when Conjuring Arts released this fantastic version of it, I sort of was, seduced into reading it again just because of how beautiful the book is. And I went through it again, and I was sort of struck by, if you look in the history of magic, every single successful magician for hundreds of years had some quite elaborate sequence in their show where they made food appear, whether it be small chocolates that were distributed, or in some cases, entire feasts with a roast turkey in the middle of the, varying levels of complexity with this idea of the production of food. But then it seems to just entirely fall out of fashion, right? It just entirely disappears.
I mean, I would argue not entirely. I mean, the one place where it still stays is the cups and balls, right? That production of the fruit is somehow better than just producing balls. Right?
Without a shadow of a doubt, right? Like the cups of the production of the fruit at the end is, I always say at that moment, I introduce the cups and balls by saying magic that is older than God, which gets the audience's attention. And then at the end, I say the reason that this trick has lived for so long is because of its eternal promise, the promise of a cup that never runs dry. Because that's what that is, right? The idea that we can have a cup to give us what we need to keep us alive. So yeah, it hasn't entirely fallen out of fashion, but I would argue that the moment in the cups is slightly different from this kind of, strange, like Hofzinser used to produce chocolates, trays full of chocolates, and they would be artisanal kind of chocolates, and he would walk along and distribute them to everyone, and everybody would that's a great moment in a magic show. I get to see great magic and eat chocolate. Of course I want that in a show, right? So but
a really fascinating one.
I'm sorry.
Robert Houdin.
Yes, yeah, of course, the bakery, right?
The patisserie was one that was fascinating, but he also produced drink. And I think what people don't realize is his advertisements were very funny. He was not as serious as we make him out to be. He was very funny. And one of the things was, come to the show, it costs you a nickel. Everyone's going to get a drink. In fact, think about so many drinks, you may not be able to drink anymore when we're done.
Yeah.
And he would just pour. It was like the hand. And of course, he put out a thimble worth of liquid, but he didn't. He would be handing out so much.
Yeah.
We've lost that moment in magic where there's a generosity from the performer to the audience in a true physical way. And you have to look at it and go, hey.
It's just like the one of the interesting things with Hofzinser and with Robert Houdin, if you look at their work, is that they were essentially the hosts within their own space, right? Which is also what I now am in the show that I'm doing, because the venue is sort of formalized as being my magic theater and so on. So when you arrive, I'm no longer at the distance that I once was when I was walking on from the side of a wing into a theater that is outside of me, right? Whereas now when you come to the show, I have to be the host. I have to welcome you into this magical environment. So suddenly when you see the way that Hofzinser would, make these chocolates appear and share them, or Robert Houdin would share the drinks and so on, you realize that it's not that dissimilar to going to your friend's house, right? When you go and visit your friend and there's a group of you, I would think your friend would be like, hey, let's make sure everybody's got a drink, and, here's some food if anyone's like the hosting role. So it's not surprising to me that with Hofzinser and with Robert Houdin and with others that found themselves in these kind of dedicated magical spaces, that they became simultaneously magical humans, but also magical hosts, because they didn't have the same distance that the stage performer, or at that point, when Robert Houdin and Hofzinser were performing, their sort of contemporary would have been the street performer, right? That was the only comparable position for the art was in taverns. At that point in England, theaters didn't exist, right? A theater was something that was built outside of a pub or a tavern. the troupe would roll up and they would open up a tent that you would perform in, like a circus. There were no formalized theatres. The Globe was the first actual permanent theatre, Shakespeare's theatre. So, you know, when you look at that, it kind of makes sense. A note, just like you say, like we forget that Robert Houdin was funny. One of the things that I love about Hofzinser, and Hofzinser is sort of obviously a hero, and every magician says, oh, Hofzinser's a hero, right? Because you can't not. But I think, you know, I very rarely meet people that have really spent time thinking about Hofzinser. And, you know, Magic Christian obviously has released those 2 incredible volumes, 4 books in total on Hofzinser. And those books are like, you know, evidence of deep mental illness, like is what those books are. Like, to be able to write those books, that is a level of obsession that is slightly frightening. But they're astonishing books. But one of the things that I think is really interesting about Hofzinser that has been lost is that he was kind of punk rock. Like, Hofzinser was this really satirical, really biting, really punk rock-like character. For example, the Everywhere and Nowhere premise, like we all assume, because Hofzinser now looks like this kind of genteel, elegant man, we assume that he must have been performing in a very genteel fashion. But of course, he was just dressed in the clothes of his day at the proper social position of where he was. So, you know, they look super elegant to us now, but actually they were regular clothes for its time period. He was just a normal guy wearing normal clothes. And, you know, a kind of astonishing fact, to buy a ticket to Hofzinser's salon, the ticket price was more than the average yearly income. Think about that for a minute. It cost more money than the average human being made in 1 year to buy 1 ticket for 1 night in Hofzinser's venue. So what this means is that the only people that we were seeing in that you would see in Hofzinser's venue would be the ultra wealthy, right? The highest of the high of Viennese society, at the very, very, very top. And so when you think about the Everywhere and Nowhere script, right? The card that is Everywhere and Nowhere. The way that Hofzinser formed that script was through a social commentary of something that was happening amongst the social elite, the it crowd of his time in Vienna. So there was this plague of the highest levels of society arriving to events and then walking in the front door and walking out the back door to be seen arriving at another event on the other side of town. So it was more important for them to be seen walking into the event than it was to actually experience the event itself. And the newspapers started calling these kinds of socialites Mr. and Mrs. Everywhere and Nowhere. This was a satirical joke that was made in a cartoon in a newspaper in Hofzinser's locale. Now, reread Hofzinser's Everywhere and Nowhere script. What you realize is that that trick is actually not this poetic notion of it being everywhere and nowhere and everywhere you look. It's actually a direct attack on the people that are in his audience. He's literally using the satirical language of the day, which was created by newspapers because of the actions of the people sat in his audience, to make fun of them after the trick is done, right? With the whole premise of Everywhere and Nowhere. So even though now, through the retroactive lens of history, we think of it as being poetic and we think of him as being genteel, actually it was super punk rock, right? That's God Save the Queen. That's the Sex Pistols. That's punk rock, to literally be challenging the authority position in front of you in that moment, in the context of the medium of the work that you do. So, and this is ever present in all of Hofzinser's work. If you look at all of his scripts, if you take the time to understand the historical context in which the script was written, then you start to see just how satirical and just how cutting he was about high society in Vienna. It's really, really an amazing thing. and kind of something that I think has been lost in the conversations about Hofzinser, largely because the magic community doesn't generally welcome anything with edge, right? Like as soon as a performer has edge, they tend to get labeled as being aggressive or an asshole or, you know, any of those things by other magicians, regardless of what the public might say about their work, right? The public might love it, but other magicians, out of often short-sightedness, assume that any performer with edge isn't commercial. So what that really means, actually, is that we don't have a good shared language, because the work that I've done has always had edge in it, right? And now probably less than ever before, because I'm older and I've got less edge about me, right? Like you chill out, you get married, you get a dog, right? Like you do all those things and you become like less edgy as a person. So it's less edgy than it's ever been. But the work I've done has always had an edge to it, and magicians have never understood that. And the reason they can't understand it is because they couldn't do it in a corporate environment, but nor would I. Right. Like, so I've always had this back and forth where I talk about how so much of magic has been derailed as an art form because there is a confusion between art and commerce. And almost all of the performance environments that have sprung up outside of formalized theatre are not actually performance environments that best suit the artful presentation of magic. Instead, what they were was ordinarily an American. I'm sorry to say, unfortunately, I think America is more guilty of this issue in magic than any other country in the world. It's generally speaking a magician that identifies some commercial opportunity to make money rather than to present magic in its best light. So if you think about the American invention of restaurant magic, I think that's probably the single worst environment to show magic in. Right? To walk up to a group full of people and interrupt them from their evening to make them watch you find a card they pick that they didn't want you to offer them in the first place, right? Now, of course, every performer has the opportunity of making their work artful, because in direct counter to what I just said, you can see Eugene Berger create this completely beautiful experience in that environment. So I'm not saying that you can't make it artful, but what I'm saying is that restaurant magic began because somebody realized I can get paid by the restaurant to do tricks, right? Trade show magic. I mean, even that phrase is kind of just utterly alien to me. Like, I don't understand those words together. You know, trade show magic. What? Like, so as an artist, what you're doing is selling your script to the highest bidder, right? Like today, if you tried to book the Royal Shakespeare Company as an example, like let's say that tomorrow some, you know, tech giant wants to get the Royal Shakespeare Company to change Hamlet to be, you know, like the name of their app, right? Let's say that the app wants product placement, right? That in Macbeth, the three witches start using Tinder, right? Or some madness, right? Let's say that that's what the company wants, and they go to the Royal Shakespeare Company. The Royal Shakespeare Company is going to say there is no amount of money that is enough for us to change the words of William Shakespeare. If you would like to sponsor the show, we can put you in the program. We can put you here, we can put you there, but we're not giving you the words. Whereas trade show magic is kind of like saying, I think so lowly of this art form that I'm willing to exchange whatever for the highest bidder, because the art form is merely a vehicle to sell your stuff. That's essentially what trade show magic is. Now, again, of course, there are people that do trade show magic very well. I've seen Paul Gertner do a great job with what he does. But from my understanding and what I'm interested in, that notion is totally alien to me, right? The one part of expression that I have as a performer is the creation of the magic I do. And that's the thing that nobody gets to touch, because that's mine, right? So the reason that I bring all of this up is that, you know, as we're discussing people like Hofzinser and performers with edge, unless there is an environment that is not defined as successful only through its commercial power, then magic generally will not welcome edge or other experiences of the magical, right? Because the common wisdom of walk out, leave them laughing, do 25 minutes of pacey stuff, make sure that you do something with the CEO and leave. All of that advice is exactly right if what you're interested in is being paid to turn up at a corporate Christmas party. The problem is not that people do that. That's not my point. Everybody's free to do whatever they want and to operate in whatever space they feel artful in. The problem is that as a community, we have assumed that that is what the form is. So then you have all of these other forms arriving, right? And in Europe, we're quite fortunate because Europeans, generally speaking, are a little more avant-garde, a little more experimental in their ticket purchasing. Like art house is kind of a thing here, and it always has been. So that's part of culture, is that you take risks with what you go and buy a ticket for. So when you think about like, fringe festivals where you have interesting magicians working in interesting, unusual ways, those magicians are doing incredible work for the audience that comes to see them. And yet at a magic convention, the consensus of, the kind of 55-year-old guy in a suit that does the same 5 tricks that everybody else does would be that guy's bad. So if anything, what Hofzinsser offers us is this kind of bulletproof counter to the closed-mindedness of many of the traditionalists in magic, right? Because many traditionalists, if you were to say, well, presumably you're a fan of Hofzinsser, right? They will fall into your trap. Right? Of course, they will say, yes, he was a genius. And then I can say, yeah, he was God Save the Queen. He was punk rock, right? He was a pierced nose and a Mohican of his time. So anyway, that's a weird rant.
No, you mentioned one really good detail that I love, and I think it's one that never gets talked about, which is you mentioned that Hofzinsser gave artisanal chocolates to people.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think people don't realize is like when Houdin was doing the orange tree, he gave out the oranges.
Yeah, of course.
And an orange was so hard to get that was miraculous. And if he didn't have oranges because they were not available through whatever means, he did roses. It was either roses or oranges, but he would give away this precious thing. We've lost back in the 60s. Alan Wakeling used to go perform his cocktail act. And the comment was that he poured out better cocktails than the bar. And specifically, he made a point of it. Like it was really important to him that what he gave the audience was better than what they could buy. And I feel like if we have power, we should be able to one-up what society presents to us for $10 or whatever it happens to be.
I completely agree.
We're squeezing on the end of time here. I'm wondering if I can pressure you to do one more thing, which is the coin thing you mentioned early.
Yeah. I'll show you a coin trick. So you've got a choice between a cylinder and coins or a coins through table. Which one would you prefer? Make your choice.
I'm giving the chat a second because I know they're going to be like typing away, be like, I want to see this.
Cylinder.
Table.
Oh, we got tables. That's interesting. Table, cylinder. My vote is coins through table. Coins through table. Oh, wow.
Okay. I would have a lot of coins through table. I expected the cylinder, but here we go. Table. Okay.
I would have guessed cylinder.
All right.
So there's something you need to imagine in this particular trick because I don't have a spectator here. So you'll notice that before I'm beginning, these coins have been signed on both sides. In the true performance of this trick, this signing process happens in real time. There is also no pre-show or anything like that going on, right? They are truly signed in real time in the performance of the trick. So I'll perform the trick as though they were not signed, and I will ask this invisible person that isn't here to sign them, and then just imagine at that point the signatures have been put on the coins. So we'll begin with something that is utterly impossible. For very old, very beautiful, very large American silver dollars, the largest coins that I could find, large enough that everybody should be able to see them clearly. Now, impossible is an extraordinary claim, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. You seem quite extraordinary to me. Maybe you can become our proof. What I would like you to do, as strange as this might sound, is actually take this pen and sign your initials as large as you can, using up as much of the surface of the coin as you can on the coin. Go ahead, they do. And then please do it on the other side, on the heads and the tails. Fantastic. Now, you did that so well that I'd like to see you do it 3 more times. Please go ahead and sign the coins on both sides. I appreciate that this is more work than you anticipated going to, but they say that voluntary work is good for the soul, and all of this applause is good for your ego. The spectator is now signing those coins. Each time they sign a coin, they get handed off. So impossible is an interesting word because we say it so casually. I once overheard a little girl, she couldn't have been more than 9 years old, turn to her mother and say, "It is impossible to find good sushi in London." 9 years old. My wife's grandmother once said to me, "This is impossible," when I was teaching her how to use Facebook. Of course, none of those things are impossible. So before we begin, I like to recite the dictionary definition. Impossible, not able to occur, to be done, or to exist. Impossible, not able to occur, not able to be done, not able to exist. I'll go ahead and roll my sleeve up so that you know nothing can come and go. And I also should clarify that these are the only 4 American silver dollars that you've ever signed on both sides. Yes, a limited edition, 4 of 4. This impossible thing happens on the count of 3. My right hand begins beneath the surface of the table. My left hand begins above. 1, 2, 3. I think Zoom filters out audio, so maybe you're not hearing banging under the table and stuff, which is a shame because it's a big part of the trick, actually. But the coin has now been heard under the table, because above the table now, where there were 4, there are only 3 signed on the heads and on the tails. 1 coin passes all the way through the surface of the table. But the important question, is that your signature? The spectator confirms it is. We continue. The spectator on this side is asked to hit the 3 coins with the pen, and you can hear them click, click, click. You can't, but they can. 1 coin goes beneath the surface of the table, 3 above, this time in slow motion. You now hear it land under the table because now there are only 2 signed on the heads and on the tails, because beneath the table, 2 coins signed on the heads and the tails. The 3rd coin, the spectator is asked to actually go ahead and look under the table to make sure that there's no trapdoors or humans. 2 coins begin beneath the surface of the table, 2 coins begin above. You know, we'll make this as simple as it can be, like this, because now 1 coin goes all the way through the surface of the table. The last coin left to travel. I should point out for any skeptical people that the surface of the table itself is solid. There's no big holes or anything. 3 coins that have traveled, leaving just 1 coin left to go. You know, we won't use those 3. We'll just use this 1 and 1 hand. And of course, it travels through the surface of the table. So this is a signed coins through table routine. And it's a shame that you're not hearing that Zoom does this weird filtering out of coins and so on, because the sound in this routine is so much a part of the impact of it. But I'll run through it very quickly. So when I first thought of the central idea in this trick, I sort of puffed my chest out and walked around my house saying I was a genius, right? I really felt proud of myself. Like, I am a genius. I'm so clever. I'm such a genius. And then I had this sort of sinking feeling that I don't think this is my idea. So I quickly emailed a bunch of my friends and I said, have you ever seen this idea anywhere? And within 10 or 15 minutes, more or less all of them had replied back to me saying, no, this is brilliant. You're a genius. So again, I was like, I'm a genius, I'm a genius, I'm a genius. And then about an hour later, somebody else emailed me back and said, yes, I have seen it before. It's mine. And then it all came flooding back to me that I'd read it, the idea somewhere. So the central idea with the signature is not my creation, it's the creation of Luis Pedrahita, a really brilliant magician from Spain. And he has published this idea in his book, Coins and Other Fables. He does not do a coins to table routine. He does a routine where a coin disappears and appears inside a fish, which is a very Luis Pedrahita trick. But the idea that Luis had here is genius. And in lots of ways, I can actually be happy that I didn't invent it, because if I had invented it, I wouldn't be able to say that it's genius. I'd have to sit here and be like, oh yeah, it's a good idea. I'd have to be pretend humble. But the fact that it's not my idea means that I can now say, this is genius, right? Because he is. So it's a flipper coin. So the flipper coin, dating back to, first appears in Greater Magic, the basic notion of the flipper coin. From that, the Dutch craftsman Eddie Teitelbaum took the idea and made it closer to what we know as the flipper coin. And then the British craftsman magician Robert Swadling kind of took what Eddie Teitelbaum had done and pushed it into becoming what we now know it as. So a flipper coin, literally, I'm sure everybody in this group knows what the flipper coin is. But the really brilliant thing that Luis realized was that if you take a flipper coin and you ask the spectator to sign it on both sides, as soon as the flipper coin is open, you have a duplicate signed coin in your hand, which is a really brilliant thing. So now let's talk about the handling. So I have the 4 coins signed. The ordinary way that we see a flipper coin opened is that you put the coin on the palm, you then show another coin and you kind of mime to the fingertips, and then you open the flipper on the hand. It's okay, but it's not for me. Like, I don't like that handling. So this is my way of opening the flipper. I take the 4 coins and I place them on the hand. That's it. I've now got an open flipper and I've stolen 1 coin. So it should look like nothing happens. So the technique here is that I'm picking up 1 coin, I'm picking up the next coin. This coin is in finger palm. I'm picking up the next coin and allowing it to fall on top. So you hear it hit, clang. Now I turn my hand over, but I only push 1 coin to the fingertips. That coin that was in finger palm just remains in finger palm the entire time. 1, 2. I now drop that one on here. And now I turn those 2 over onto the flipper. So I've still got 1 in finger palm the entire time. Now, all I need to do to open the flipper, because I have the tension set very low, is to pick it up and swing it out. This kind of arc. So that now means that we get this. So it just looks like you pick up 4 coins and put them on your palm, but you actually have 1 in finger palm. Now I'm going to lap this coin, but I don't want my hand to come back to the edge of the table for no reason, especially not in a coins to table routine. So I say, here, I'll go ahead and pull my sleeve up so you can see that nothing can come or go. So the sleeve actually brings the hand back to the table edge. So from here, as I pull the sleeve back, I'm now at the table edge to release the coin into the lap, but now I immediately come back and point here. So as far as the audience is concerned, this hand never went back, right? Like, the other thing at this moment is to avoid the kiss of death in coin magic, which is the moment the coin is not in palm, the magician immediately turns into a scarecrow, right? And all this does is teach the audience when you're palming. That's all it does. Your empty hand should mimic your palming hand, and the emptiness of the empty hand should be shown through casual gestures or through gesticulation in the context of the scripts you do, right? I just showed you my hands 5 times there as being empty without doing any scarecrow stuff. So we come back here with the 4 coins on display, the spectator can see 4 signed coins, which is, a remarkable thing with this method. And I come back here with the finger palm naturalness still here. I want to show the hand empty. So I say to the spectator, I should confirm that these are the only 4 American silver dollars that you've ever signed on both sides. Yes, a limited edition, 4 of 4. So now you've seen an empty hand without me scarecrowing. This hand goes under the table and I do the slidini imp pass, reaching forward and around. Now in the hand here, I just close the flipper and put it to the table. So now I've just got 3. Now I want to move this coin to here, but it's weird to do that. But because of all of the handling, the coins come out tails, tails, heads. So actually you get to move it quite logically because I say, look, you can see they're signed on the heads and on the tails. And it just sort of takes care of that reordering in a way that's better than just moving it for no reason. That puts the flipper in the middle. I now pick up these 3 coins, and this is another original way of opening the flipper. I pick up the packet of coins, and notice I'm using the word packet because this is like a card trick. I take a break with my thumb on the bottom coin. This hand comes out, and as it comes out, the coin that's on the bottom of the group is dropped into the lap. Because that coin is keeping the flipper closed, the flipper now opens, and all I need to do is extend the hand forwards to the table for 3 coins to be visible, which you're not seeing clearly from this angle, but the flipper is now open. So imagine that falls into the lap, you see the flipper is open, and now I just toss forwards and they see 3 coins on the table. So at speed, it comes from here to here to here to the confirmation. So now I've got an open flipper here, 1 real coin, the coin that's just gone through, and 1 in the lap. Now I can go underneath the table, pick up the coins, and of course I'm going to allow them to hit under the table. I close up the flipper as I do this, and now I do a little Roger Klaus inspired feint there, and under the table I allow it to hit. So they hear it arrive. I show both signed coins on both sides, and again I take that break. I now come up from under the table to display the 2. I'm going to do 2, 3 things at once. I'm going to finger palm a coin, turn the hand over, release a coin, the flipper will open and I'll throw it forwards. So it's like a little bit like Jeff Latter's handling of emptying a coin from a shell, but with the flipper immediately opening. So now I have a 3rd coin in finger palm. So now I can show these 2. Now I drop these 2 over the coin in finger palm and I just push 1 coin forward to cover it. So the coin is now in Morik grip or purse palm, as it's often called, beneath the other 2 coins in the hand. This goes under the table. Now you won't have heard any of this, but this is important in the real world when you really do the trick, because this is the first time we have an ambient sound problem. Up until this moment in the trick, anytime we've had an open flipper, we've had 1 other coin with it so that it always makes noise. However, now we only have 1 coin that's pretending to be 2. It can't make noise. So we need to solve this in some way. My solution is that beneath the table, I take these 3 coins and I lift up 2 of them from the packet, from the group, like this. This is happening under the table. Timed with this, I take the flipper and I close it. And now as my hand turns over, under the table, I allow those coins to fall forward. So they make the sound of 2 coins in the hand. Now, when I thumb the flipper out, underneath the table, I'm pushing 1 coin out. So you're hearing silver on silver above the table. This also now creates the perfect position for that coin to be dropped on here. So if you try this with your own coins, it's desperately deceptive. It's really deceptive. And so now I mime the coin here and I do this, and now I come up and reveal 3. Now I'm going to repeat the first steal, but instead of doing it to the hand, I just do it to the table because it works just as well. So I've stolen 1 coin in finger palm, I have an open flipper and 3 regular. Now I want to lap this coin, but I don't want to bring my hand back to the edge of the table for no reason. So I say, I should just clarify there's no big holes in the surface of the table. And in the action of bringing the mat back, that allows me to release the coin. So it goes from finger palm. As my hand moves forward, it goes to the back of the hand like this. And I'll pick up the mat. And at this moment, I can drop the coin in the lap as I now transfer and come back, so that there's no reason that the hand ever went away from the center of the table. I now pick up the open flipper +1 onto this hand and the genuine final coin onto this hand. I close this hand around it and set it for a han pen shen here. I take the open flipper and to the table. I say, I'm going to place these under the table. You know what? Actually, we won't use those three. And now that's a han pen shen with a flipper, so this hand is empty. This is very falling. With a flipper, this technique is just so good because you see 3 coins on the palm, and then you see 3 coins on the table. It's just very falling, right? But that empties this hand out. So now I can reach under, acquiring the coin that's in the lap, and underneath the table here, I slam this last coin up and then I push it. So on the last coin that goes through, there is this very loud bang, right, for the final coin. And now it comes out and there's all 4 coins through the table. So there you go. There's a signed handling of coins through the table.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And you know, the interesting thing about the cylinder, which I'll perform but not explain, because you now won't need an explanation for it, actually, thinking about it, is that the handling of the cylinder was developed entirely because in the show that the cylinder now is in, I began by doing the coins through table as a kind of middle point in the show. So I had the coins through table in the show, but that meant that if I wanted to do a cylinder routine, I couldn't suddenly swap the 4 signed coins for 4 unsigned coins, right? It would be so weird. So that led to this new kind of technical challenge of how am I going to do the cylinder with the signed coins? So that's where this comes from. If I was doing the cylinder by itself, I would never have the signed coins because it's unnecessary. But because of the sequence in the show that it's in, I have to have the signed coins. So there are 2 types of people in the world. There are people, when they watch magic, that kind of release themselves into it like they're watching a Disney movie. They embrace the experience. And then there's a second kind of person, a kind of person who, when confronted with impossibilities, finds themselves descending into a kind of blind intellectual rage. It creates frustration and anger and fear and panic. And intellectually, they cannot experience this without just finding themselves filled with anger and rage. So I need to point out to you right now that if you are that kind of person, then this might be enough to send you over the edge into an abyss from which you will never recover. So if for the next few moments, in the interest of your personal safety, you need to leave, feel free. We'll bring you back in 2 or 3 minutes when this danger has passed. A brave audience. I'm going to ask you to help me out because we have some simple but unusual objects that you might not see every day. The first is this. It's a cylinder made from leather. It's actually a strap of leather that's been sewn together on one edge so that you can see all the way through it. I'd like you to go ahead and take a look at that. Make sure that it is truly what it appears to be, a strap of leather sewn together. The next thing is this, a slither of a wine cork, the very top of a wine cork that's been cut free. Go ahead and take a look at that and make sure that it is truly what it appears to be. 2 spectators examine the objects. They confirm that they are. The idea is simple. Because the cylinder has no top or bottom, the little piece of cork can pass all the way through. Don't worry, that's not the rage-inducing nightmare. That's just the way it works. The little piece of cork is going to be a marker that we'll place right here on the corner of the table, where you won't forget about it. Our first coin begins inside the hand, and yet with just I forgot, for my skeptical friends, you have to always make sure that the sleeve is rolled back. because then they know that nothing could travel up the sleeve, and yet the coin disappears. We'll try again with the next coin. As simple as that, a tap on the hand and the coin disappears. It's gone. The next coin, the third, oh, you know, before we go any further, it's important that you don't forget about that small piece of cork. Remember, it's right there. Our third coin, with just a tap, completely disappears. Our fourth and final coin, after just a moment, completely disappears. But the coins never go far. They always travel to the same place. Underneath, the small piece of cork sat right there on the very front of the table. And what I would like you to do is to confirm that and they confirm that the signature is present, so they see it. And now we move on. It's difficult without a spectator in these offbeat moments, but we'll go ahead and actually cover over the coins with the cylinder. Oh, you know, I forgot the most important thing, the small piece of cork. Don't forget about the piece of cork right there on top of the coins, because now it's as simple as, there's one, there is two, there is three, and you can see that these aren't rubber or anything. These are real heavy, solid coins right here inside of this existence. And yet the fourth one, just like that, all four coins back, because now underneath the tube, just that small piece of cork. And there we have a version of the cylinder and coins with the four signed coins, which at this point can now be examined. That's it. Well, I hope you had a great time. It would take about 4 hours for me to explain that trick, but since you know the basic principle from the signed coins to the table, we can explain the most basic aspect of it. I won't go into all of the handling because it would just be insane to explain that right here and right now. But I just lost the second piece of cork, but we don't need it for this discussion. The simple notion of this is that once I've got these four signed coins, one of which is a flipper, at any point you can have a duplicate signed coin. So I have a stack of coins, which is only 3 thick, not 4. And on that stack, I've placed some putty on the top. So just some putty on the top of the stack. That stack begins in finger palm. I can now take 2 coins like this, pick up 2 coins and drop them on the stack. I now push the first coin out onto the next coin, just like I did on the coins to table, but I've now created a signed stack in my palm because I've just pushed the other coin into the stack. And now as soon as I come here and open the flipper, I've still got 4 signed coins visible, even though now I've got a signed stack in finger palm. To take that signed coin off of the stack, all I have to do is use my thumb to dislodge it, at which point I can pick up those 3, closing the flipper, and just place them back on the table. So now I've got the stack without the signed coin. Another alternative to this is that the stack begins in the lap. This is what I did tonight because I had the cylinder down to the side. So it gave me a reason to lean, right? So if it's in the lap, I can steal 1 coin. So you see 4 signed coins, and as I relax here to reach for the props for the cylinder, in my lap, I'm placing the signed coin here. And now as my body shifts to pick up the cylinder, I'm swinging around and pushing it onto the stack. And then I'm coming back with the cylinder and immediately putting it into finger palm as I return to the table. So I'm building in real time a stack with a signed coin on the top. So lots of interesting things that you can do once you realize that you can have 4 coins here and this one can go anywhere, right? So the cylinder is just an application of that. I'm going to go. I hope you had a great time. I hope that this was interesting for you and maybe surprising, because you all came here expecting discussions about tarot cards and mind reading, and what you got was McDonald's aces and cylinder and coin.
Well, thank you so much, Luke.
You enjoyed it.
Yeah, Luke, that was spectacular. I mean, and even in the comments, you can just see everyone gushing after every single thing, which is great.
Good.
Yeah,
Everybody,
thank you.
thank you very much. I'm leaving right now.
Be gone.